Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big stories behind everyday things. Today, we're diving deep into something most of us can't imagine living without: our daily coffee.
And I mean, we really can't live without it. Get this, every single day, humanity drinks over 2 billion cups of coffee. It's what gets us going in the morning, it's our little ritual. It is one of the most popular drinks on the entire planet. But have you ever really stopped and wondered where the money you pay for that coffee actually goes? I mean, look at this breakdown. A huge chunk goes to rent and paying the barista. Okay, that makes sense. But look way, way down at that tiny little sliver of the pie. That's for the coffee itself. And the farmer, the person who actually grew the beans, they get a fraction of even that. We're talking pennies. So, how on earth did that happen? How did something we all love so much become so incredibly unequal? Well, that's the paradox we're going to unpack today, right in your coffee cup. Let's get into it. To really understand how we got here, we have to go back, way back. Our story doesn't start in a trendy cafe, not at all. It starts in the highlands of what we now call Ethiopia. The legend, and it's a great one, is that it all began with a goat herder. He noticed his goats were going absolutely wild, practically dancing, after eating these little red berries off of a tree. So he thought, well, why not, and tried them for himself. And just like that, the coffee revolution was on. Now here's where things take a really interesting turn. As coffee crossed just a narrow strip of water, the way people used it completely changed. See, in Africa, people just ate the berries whole to get that energy boost. But once it got to the Arabian Peninsula, someone had the brilliant idea to roast the beans, grind them up, and add hot water. And that, right there, is the moment coffee became the drink we all know. And this new drink just exploded in popularity. It kicked off a whole cultural revolution. You know, in Europe, you had taverns. But in the Islamic world, where alcohol was forbidden, coffee was the perfect alternative. Coffee houses started popping up everywhere. And they weren't just places to get a drink. They were centers for debate, for business, for intellectual life. They became what we'd now call a third place. Not home, not work. Sound familiar? Yeah, modern coffee chains basically built their entire empire on that concept. So, what's the secret sauce here? Well, it's caffeine, of course. This molecule is basically a brilliant little chemical hacker. It gets into your brain and literally blocks the signals that are telling you you're tired. At the exact same time, it tells your brain to release more of the good stuff, like dopamine and adrenaline, which is why you feel so awake, focused, and maybe even a little bit happier. So everyone wanted this amazing new drink. Demand was through the roof. But, and this is a huge but, creating a global supply chain for it came at a terrible price. It was built on a brutal economic model that would shape the world for centuries. To keep up with Europe's growing addiction, the colonial powers needed a way to produce coffee on a massive industrial scale, and they did it using the horrifyingly efficient system of the triangular trade. Ships left Europe with goods, traded those goods in Africa for enslaved people, forced those people across the Atlantic to work on plantations growing coffee, sugar, and tobacco, and then shipped those cash crops back to Europe for sale. The human cost, it's just staggering to think about. By some estimates, we're talking about as many as 17 million people, men, women, and children, stolen from their homes and forced into slavery, all to power this colonial machine. And this system of forced labor had a very clear economic result. It made coffee beans incredibly cheap. Brazil shot up to become the world's #1 coffee producer, a position built entirely on the backs of enslaved people. In fact, Brazil was one of the very last countries in the Americas to abolish slavery, waiting until 1888. That cheap labor model got baked into the global price of coffee. Okay, so even after formal slavery was abolished, the economic imbalance it created didn't just go away. In fact, its legacy is still deeply woven into the modern coffee industry and the price you pay for your daily cup. And the difference is it's stark. In a lot of coffee-growing countries today, a worker on a farm might earn in an entire day what one single latte costs in a big city. An entire day of hard labor for just one drink. This huge imbalance is why some people call it a form of economic slavery. So then, in the 20th century, the big coffee corporations perfected this whole thing. They weren't just selling a drink anymore. They were selling the social experience around it. They took that third place idea from those old Arabian coffee houses and turned it into a global phenomenon, making Let's Go Get Coffee a core part of modern life. And who's drinking all this coffee? Well, it's pretty much the wealthiest nations. The US and the European Union are the biggest consumers by a long shot. If you look at the map of who drinks the coffee and who grows it, it's pretty much a direct echo of those old colonial trade routes.
And here's the business genius of it all. You take that incredibly cheap raw material, the bean, and you just start adding things to it. Add a little hot water, boom, it's an Americano, a drink supposedly invented for American soldiers in Italy. Add some milk, you've got a latte. Add cream and vanilla sugar, now it's a ROF, an invention from a Moscow cafe. Each little addition just multiplies the profit.
But the story of coffee isn't just about economics and exploitation. It's got some really weird and surprising twists. It's also been this amazing catalyst for human ingenuity. And sometimes that ingenuity is driven by, well, just wanting to be a little lazy. So picture this. It's 1991. You're in a computer lab at Cambridge University. There's a group of scientists working late into the night. And what are they fueled by? You guessed it, coffee. Lots of it.
But they had one major critical problem. The office coffee pot was all the way down the hall. And they kept making this long trek only to discover that it was empty. A total tragedy, right? So, what do you do when you're a bunch of brilliant but fundamentally lazy engineers faced with such a devastating problem? Well, you engineer a solution. They rigged up a camera, pointed it right at the coffee pot, and wrote a little program to send a live picture to their computers 3 times a minute. Now they could check the coffee level without ever leaving their chairs. And that simple caffeine-fueled desire to avoid a wasted walk gave birth to the world's very first webcam. Seriously, the technology that is now in billions of devices all over the world connecting all of us was invented just to keep an eye on a coffee pot. So the next time you take a sip of coffee, what are you going to think about? The dancing goats? The dark and complicated history of global trade? Or the simple act of laziness that sparked a world-changing invention? The story in your cup is so much bigger and so much more complex than you ever imagined.